Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield and Jerry Brisco. Good morning, sirs. How are you, Mr. Brisco?
I'm doing wonderful this beautiful morning here in Tampa, Florida. I'm looking out, the sky is blue. We're supposed to get a feels-like temperature here in Florida today of 112 degrees. They're warning all of us old people, which is everybody in the state of Florida, not to go outside today because we might die of heat stroke. John saved my life in Iowa a few years back, when I had the dehydration. So I know what the feeling is. So if you're old like me, drink a lot of water and stay inside that air conditioning.
Yeah, Mr. Brisco, I saw it made national news yesterday. It's the hottest day in history for Tampa. It hit 100 degrees.
Isn't that something? The first time in history we hit 100 degrees as hot as it is there. Since they've been keeping records of temperatures, which goes back over 100 and some odd years. Yesterday was the first day that our official station got officially 100 degrees. So I'm still alive for that. Wow, I can't believe I've made history. I'll live to see history here in Tampa.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot of history today, especially Tampa history. John, we're doing a show today that you and I kind of hoped we'd never have to do.
Yep.
But, in the comic books, our superheroes never die, but in wrestling, unfortunately, they do. Mm-hmm. And the immortal Hulk Hogan will live on, but unfortunately, Terry Bollea and his time with us is now done. What shocking news, John. How did you first receive the news?
On my phone. I was I don't remember exactly where it was. I remember looking at it and said Hulk Hogan has died, and then just a straight text. It was like a news app. It wasn't somebody that sent it to me, and I you just get those things. That's just awful. It heard that he wasn't doing as well as they said he was, and so when I got that, I just it's just. I text my old college roommates. I'm on a text like everybody else is with, sending inappropriate messages and things that around to your old buddies. I've been with these guys for 30 plus years since college, and I remember when we were in the dorm, my roommate John Busing, who's a retired state trooper now, after WrestleMania, would answer the phone, Hulkamania. And because that was our guy, we watched Hulk. We lived and died with the guy. That was in the 85, 86 era, so it was right in the WrestleMania area, and so it was huge for Hulk, and so that was a big deal for us.
I have to admit, I kind of thought that you would have missed Hulk Hogan as a part of your fandom. I just thought the timelines would have been different. But actually, last week, while we were together last week in Iowa, our buddy, our resident gimmick attorney, Mike Dawkins, showed me something that he had you sign. And I thought, how have I never heard of this? But it turns out our pal JBL actually had an NFL trading card from ProSet.
Yes.
And what's interesting is the last line on the back of the card says you also do an incredible impression of Hulk Hogan. And I thought it was interesting that you have a football trading card, and on the card, they mention your impersonation of Hulk Hogan. How fun is this? When did you first start doing a Hulk Hogan impression? Was that like your Macho Man? You were just doing it through the 80s and 90s?
Yeah, it was exactly what it was. We were in college, and we all did Hulk Hogan. We'd all do the riding on the world's largest bike. My bike breaks down. I had to hop on the 24-inch pythons, and the last 8 miles I ran on my arms. Swimming through the ocean, through the sharks. He did those crazy promos. That somehow that always ended up on the world's largest arms. And so I always did those promos. And we were in training camp in San Antonio in the World League, and we had so many injuries. So the defense was running like a 3-man front or something. So they had plenty of players to rotate. We had 6 offensive linemen for the entire training camp because of injuries. So we're most of the guys are never come off the field. So we're running against number 1s, number 2s. It was beyond hell. It was the hardest training camp I've ever been through. And so what I would do was during water breaks, I would do Hulk Hogan impersonations for the guys because we're dying out there. It was as hot as it could freaking be in San Antonio in the spring. And we're dying because we don't have any backups. We're trying to figure out who's going to make it, who's going to not make it. And so the training camp was really hard. And every day I do these Hulk Hogan impersonations. And the guys would all sit around and cheer and join in and do stuff. So that's how the whole thing came about. And then when they gave me the football card, that's the one thing they put on it, because that is the one thing I did. I even did one with a TV station down there. They had me come on TV and do a Hulk Hogan impersonation.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. Dave Silva, if you could possibly find that, it's on the internet. John Layfield, I think it's right pregame. He's talking to one of those big hair guys.
That's right.
That TV. And then John breaks into a Hulk Hogan promo there. You got to find it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so the whole thing was just to entertain the guys, because we were dying out there in the heat, and then it just became kind of a gimmick. And I loved Hogan. I'll tell you one thing I did one time. Hogan was in San Antonio, and I was playing football in San Antonio. Mike Riley was our head coach. Jason Garrett was our quarterback, who ended up coaching with the Dallas Cowboys and playing in a few Super Bowls, mainly as a backup quarterback. And so we had Hogan was going to be there in San Antonio at the old Freeman Coliseum. I had tickets to it. And Mike Riley, who's a great practical joker, wonderful guy, I love Mike, Coach Riley. He says, guys, we got a meeting tonight. They did the whole meeting so I couldn't go to the wrestling. And so I'm depressed because I've got these tickets to go see Hulk Hogan. And all of a sudden now Coach Riley has made a meeting. It was all a rib. The whole team was in on it. And I'm like pouting the whole practice because I don't get to go see Hulk Hogan. And I don't want to do anything. I'm getting in fights. I'm doing all this shit. Finally, at the end of practice, Coach Riley gets together and goes, by the way, we don't have a meeting, John. Have fun watching Hulk Hogan tonight. So it was like, damn it, I pouted for 2 hours.
John, what was it about Hulk Hogan that made him?
There's my college football. There's my college football pick. Wonder why I ever got in trouble.
John, what was it about Hulk Hogan that made you such a fan?
I think the crazy promos. I talked to Vince about this. Vince helped write him those promos. Hogan was not 100% for these promos. And Vince would write these crazy promos, about he was swimming through the Gulf of Mexico and trying to get to the show. And, the boat broke down. He's pulling the boat and the world's largest arms. And Vince talked Hogan into these promos that became so iconic, but these were just fun. Hogan would come on there and he's larger than life, and plus he's just huge. For a college kid who wants to be big, we idolize the Arnolds, the Ronnie Colemans, Lee Haney's, guys like that, and Hogan was one of those guys.
We are celebrating the life and times of Hulk Hogan today. We're doing it with Mr. JBL and, of course, Mr. Brisco. And Mr. Brisco, I don't think some of our listeners probably know that Hulkamania may have never gotten started if it weren't for a couple of Briscos. Tell us the origin story.
Oh, man, great story. And, I sometimes, how stories change throughout the years. I mean, sometimes I don't even think Jack and I ever met Hulk Hogan or the years. So many people want to jump up and take credit, and that's fine. I don't care. I know the real story. Terry knew the real story. Terry thanked me every time he saw me. But, it was back in the days when Florida Championship Wrestling was hotter than a firecracker. I mean, we were drawing sellouts every Tuesday night in the Armory, every Wednesday night in Miami. So, all of a sudden, during the course of all this expansion and greatness that Florida Championship Wrestling was doing, every Tuesday night, when you go to the ring, you kind of scope out the audience, you look around, you see if you see familiar faces, you kind of give them a nod and all that stuff. But we kept seeing this young guy, this big young guy, sitting about 10 rows back, right in the middle of the aisle, and he sat the same place every Tuesday night. He had long bleached blonde hair. Of course, everybody knows where I'm going with that. It was Terry Bollea. So every Tuesday night we would see him on Wednesday morning for TVs or anything like that. But every Tuesday night at the Armory, we would see this guy. So we started asking questions. I mean, we're stockholders in the Florida Championship Wrestling, so we're always on the look for young, nice looking talent. So, we got real curious, and so one Tuesday night we see this young lady that Jack and I knew that worked in a bar. She was a bartender at a local college bar. So we asked her, "Hey, who is that big blonde-headed guy out there that we see you talking to?" Oh, that's Terry. He works in a rock and roll band. Sure would like to meet him. When is he playing? Well, he's playing next Thursday night, at the bar called Ruckus out by the campus out there. So Jack and I just happened to be in a little spot show. I can't remember what spot show, but we got back in Tampa earlier. And of course, we're two wrestlers. It's hot summer night here in Florida. Let's go get a beer. So we went away. Let's go out there. I can't remember the young lady's name, but go out where there's that big rock and roll guy playing. We called him the rock and roll guy back in those days. So of course we all awesome. That's him, man. But so we walk in this bar, college bar, and all these college kids around and everything. And it's great atmosphere. We look up on stage, and there's Terry up there with that little bass guitar. Now, Terry at that time, he was over 300 pounds, and he, of course, 6'6", whatever heck he is, a big guy. And he's standing there, and average rock and roll guy is about 5'6", and about 160 pounds. Here's Terry, looks like he's holding a toothpick, playing that bass guitar, and he just, everybody else looks like Hornswoggle compared to him. So we talk to the young lady. I mean, during break time, set us up a little meeting. We'd like to talk to him. So that's really how it all started. Of course, break time come, and we went to enter. I know who you guys are. Thanks for coming out. Blah blah, all that stuff. Hey, we hear you're interested in becoming a wrestler. He said, "Yeah, I'd love to be one." And just the thing about it is, we always talk about Minnesota, Robinsondale High School. Well, here in Tampa, we have Robinson High School that Dick Slater, Mike Graham, Steve Kern, and Terry Bolea, they all come out of that high school. But it's kind of coincidence that Minnesota, you have your Robinsondale, and up in here, down there in Florida, we have Robinson High School. But anyway, he'd gone to high school with all these guys, so he was always kind of watching. I left out Mike McCord too in that group. And so he said, I've always watched wrestling. I know I'm aware of the Grahams and all that stuff. Never met anybody like that. But okay, well, let us try to set you up an appointment. So we called Eddie, told Eddie what we're doing. He gave us the blessing. Go ahead. Eddie was always looking for talent. And so we contacted Hero. We got this big guy coming in. We want to see what he's got. He's a rock and roller. And all of a sudden, you mentioned rock and roller back in those days, always did that cloud of, well, does he really want to come in this business, or do he just want to make fun of us? So Matt Suda is our policeman, as our enforcer policeman down here in Florida. So we put Matt Suda in the ring with him. Now I was there, and where was it? Cleveland, Friday night. Me and Bruce were talking, and Bruce Pritchard, the guy that used to be around on this show that John Morton-Appley replaced and become a bigger superstar than Bruce. Bruce, what's his name now? And so anyway, he said, there is a video of that out there somewhere. Me and Jack standing in one corner, Eddie standing in the other corner, Matt Suda, and I said, Bruce, you got to find it. And so we got Bruce on the trying to find this video. I don't recall a video, but Bruce said he's seen one. So if Bruce said that, it's got to be the truth, right, Conrad? I mean, it never.
Oh yeah, absolutely, never. So
anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say there's lots of rumor and innuendo about Hiro Matsuda. I mean, allegedly he hurt Hulk Hogan. Now there's different versions of this I've heard from different people. You were there, or you're at least familiar with the story. What really happened with Hiro Matsuda?
Allegedly there, which I was in reality, I was there, my brother and I. There were only 3 people there outside the ring besides Hiro and Terry, and that was it.
Hey, Jerry, let me cut you off right quick. I want to reiterate that you and your brother and Hiro were there, right? Yeah. So you're the only ones. You're the only ones that were actually there, right?
Yeah, well, Eddie was there too. Eddie was off in the background, so he was there too. So I got to throw Eddie in there. So they're going to, of course, in the beginning of it, I will bore everybody with the preliminaries because that's part of the story. So we're running this rock and roll. Now, mind you, Terry had played his gig that Tuesday night or Wednesday night, whatever night. I think it was a Thursday morning we did it. So he had played his regular gig. So, those bars down here, they don't close until sunrise, basically. So 4 hours later, Terry is in a ring and sportatorium, which there's no air conditioning in there. It's probably 115 degrees in there, and he just played a gig up all night. Probably had him a few adult beverages and whatnot during the course of the night. So he's sweating like crazy, and his tongue is starting to hang out. Matt said, "We're going through all these drills." Matt said, "Is putting him through every torture drill you could possibly have." Okay, it ain't over with yet. So then they got to get to the physical part of it. Terry's a big strapping dude, and Hero was about a 6 foot, 210, 15 pounder at the max, but he was a twisted arm. The guy was just stronger than hell. So they start rolling around, and Matsuda sees this guy. He's starting to gasp for a little bit of air. So, okay, here I go. So he I'm gonna start punishing the guy now because he's not prepared. But he worked all damn night long. So Matsuda starts at the arm or starts at the top of the head and works his way down through the ankle finally. And all of a sudden, he looks over at Eddie. Eddie just kind of gives a little nod like that, and Matsuda really starts working on that ankle. Next thing you know, you hear this kind of strange noise coming from the ring. I mean, we're all listening, really intent to try to hear if we can hear Teddy tap out or anything. I said, or tell him, I've had enough. But Terry's not doing that. And all of a sudden we hear this snap and we hear Terry, ow! And just like that. I mean, Terry's got just regular street shoes on. I think he got some type of tennis shoe on. And so he rolls out, and man, he kept putting weight on the foot there. And he starts giving, hey, you want to be a wrestler, man? This is part of things happen in the ring. Things happen. Terry didn't bitch or complain or anything like that. He said, I think my ankle's broke. I need to go to the doctor. And Eddie said, okay, go to the doctor. So Terry hobbled out to the car down. Some people say, Beefcake was there, Brian was there, all that. Nobody was there except me, Jack, and Eddie, and Hero. And so he stumbles out to his car. He gets in there, and I walk him out to the car, and he said, I will be back. And I said, okay, sure. So, he leaves. We think that's the end of it. We don't see him for a couple of weeks in the audience here in Tampa. About 4 or 5 weeks later, I'm sitting in the office helping do the booking, and I get a telephone call. Old Charlie lay downstairs. Brisco, it's that Terry guy that worked out with Matt Sid a few weeks ago. He wants to talk to you. I said, okay, I don't know if he called and say he's going to sue us or what, So I pick up the phone. He said, hey, I'd like to come back. He said, I'm in better shape now, and my ankle's healed up. And, contrary to popular belief, his ankle wasn't broke, his leg wasn't broke, but it was severely sprained. I mean, he showed me a picture where it was black and blue and purple. And so about 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later, whatever it was probably about a month later, he called. He wants to go back. So he's smarter this time. He doesn't book a gig the night before. He gets his rest. He comes in. Terry is in good shape. Of course, he always looked, he had that tan body and all that stuff. Always was huge. So he comes back. He gets in the ring. We put him through the preliminary stuff just like before. This time, his tongue's not dragging out. He's not breathing, hyperventilating when he's breathing. And so, we see some improvement in that. And maybe it's just because he didn't have that gig or where he's working at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning the night before. But he gets in the ring with Hero, and he starts competing with him. And Hero, after about 15 minutes of kind of torturing type workout that people just don't understand, we're getting into the wrestling business back in the 70s and 80s was not an easy deal. You really had to show the people breaking you into most of the places that weren't out just for your money, but a territorial break-in deal. They tortured the hell out of these guys. And that was part of it. And so Terry was hanging on, and they started, grappling around a little bit, and Terry was holding his own. All of a sudden, it breaks up, and Matt should have come over and tell Jack and I, this guy's improved. So that was the preliminary workout with Hogan. That was my first case. I don't have a date on it or even a year on it, but I just remember it very well.
I think he started wrestling in 77. Does that sound about right? 1977?
Sounds about right. I got Yeah, I was assistant booker then. I think I was backing up Johnny Valentine at the time. Johnny come in and 77, 78. I got this little blue book right here from the NWA. It tells you the year. I looked it up to see when I was assistant booker to Valentine was 77, 78.
Hey, Jerry, what did Hero do to his ankle? I mean, physically, what did he do?
He put. I mean, it sounds kind of hokey, but he put like an ankle lock on Terry. But he did it for real. Where you wrap that ankle and you get in a certain position. All you got to do is just crank it a little bit, and it'll pop. I mean, even if you don't break it, it'll pop because the joints don't go that way. They're adjusting themselves. So it was sort of like an ankle lock. It's exactly what it was.
And Hero was trying to break his ankle.
Well, he was trying to do some damage to the. I wouldn't say break it, but he was trying to do some severe damage, just to let him know that
he wasn't going to shed a tear if he broke it.
No, Hero wasn't that type of emotional type guy at all.
We're doing a tribute here for Hulk Hogan. We are live on YouTube. If you've got a question for Mr. Brisco or Mr. Bradshaw, we certainly want you to hit us with it now. We actually have advertisements in the program today. I feel weird about that, but we sold these things months ago. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back after these words. All right, guys, I love talking about Brunt Workwear because I love their story and I love their boots. Choosing work boots used to mean sacrificing comfort or sacrificing durability, meaning if they felt good, well, they didn't last. And if they lasted, dude, they just wreck your feet. Brunt thought that was a bunch of BS, so they built tough boots that feel great from day one. There's no break-in period. There's no sore feet because the people out there doing the real work shouldn't have to choose between comfort and durability. The founder is a fellow named Eric, and he grew up blue collar, and he started Brunt Workwear after his friends in the trades kept telling him that the big brands had stopped listening. And they hadn't changed in like 100 years. They'd sold out to become fashion brands. His buddies encouraged him to start a brand built for them. And that's why all of the Brunt products are named after the guys he grew up with. Real hardworking tradesmen. I love that story. And there's no doubt the most comfortable work boots I've ever worn are made by Brunt. They feel comfortable right out of the box. There's no painful break-in period like all the other brands. And these boots aren't just comfortable. They're built to perform. Whether you need waterproof or safety toe or soft toe, pull on, even lace up, they've got options that can handle whatever you're doing on the job site. And by the way, Brunt stands behind what they make. You can wear them to work. And if they're not right for you, send them back. I don't know of another brand doing that. That's a company that truly believes in their product. And right now, for a limited time, our listeners can get $10 off at Brunt when you use the code WRESTLE at checkout. Just head over to bruntworkwear.com and use the code WRESTLE, and you're good to go. I'm telling you, I absolutely love their stuff. Not just the boots, by the way. They've got a whole range of high-performance gear built for the tough jobs. They've got the heavy-duty work pants. They've got weather-resistant jackets and everything in between. Brunt was tired of these workwear brands that are out there cutting corners. You work too hard to be stuck in uncomfortable boots that just don't hold up. So Brunt built something better. Boots that are insanely comfortable and built for any job site. So right now, for a limited time, our listeners can get $10 off at Brunt when you use the code WRESTLE at checkout. Just head on over to bruntworkwear.com, use our code WRESTLE, and you're good to go. And after you order, they're going to ask how you heard about Brunt. Do us a favor and tell them it was from this show. Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. We are live, and we want to hear your questions about Hulk Hogan, and we're doing our best to pay tribute to one of the true Mount Rushmores of pro wrestling. He should be on everyone's. And Instagram, a wrestling historian, seemingly always brings the good questions, John, and he's got one for you. He says, I remember reading a story on the internet during your WWE Championship reign that you reportedly told Hulk Hogan backstage, this is your belt. Is that the way you felt? Is this the real story, John?
Oh, my God. Yeah. It was one of the greatest thrills of my life. I told you, in college, I mean, literally, my college roommates would answer the phone, Hulkamania, because we watched, we loved the pay-per-views. We loved Hogan. He's bigger than life. He's what a college athlete wants to look like. You want to have the big arms. You want to have the great personality. You want to have that. And so we lived and died with Hogan. And so we were in Philadelphia. People have asked where the match was. I believe it was Philadelphia. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was. And I had a dark match with Hogan. It was a six-man. It wasn't a single. And I remember sitting there, and I said, what do you want to do, Hulk? And he goes, you're the champ. And I thought, oh my God, I could die right now.
Right.
This is the greatest moment of my life. I'm not only working with Hogan, he just literally telling me to call the match, which Hogan was great like that. And literally I told him, I said, brother, this is your belt. This ain't mine. I don't care who holds it. I don't care who claims they won it. This is your belt. And that is 100% how I felt about it. That was Hogan's belt. That wasn't mine. I always felt that way.
Ringside with What a Day Joe Lowry says, before the internet and social media, Hulk Hogan was the most popular person on the planet. He touched every corner of the world. He will be missed. Thank you, guys. Hashtag RIP Hulk Hogan. Mr. Briscoe, I don't think that's necessarily even overstating it. I mean, I think during the 80s, Hulk Hogan, Mike Tyson, Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan, those are probably the most famous Americans on an international scale. I mean, they were pop culture, and you didn't have to speak English to know who Hulk Hogan was. Were you surprised that this bass player that you saw playing in a band in Tampa was now one of the most recognizable faces in the world?
I'd like to say I know I wasn't because I'm that smart, but I wasn't that smart. But you could look at the guy. And to me, I mean, there's guys that you can look at and say, man, this guy has all the tools to become a star. When we met Terry, and Terry had that voice that that was kind of deep voice and kind of just kind of rhymed with everything he said. And during the interview process, he was very articulate to us. You just knew that he had the greatest. Of course, it didn't take Ray Charles could see that he had the looks to become a superstar. But there's just so much more to it than that. And all this stuff wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for that young lady that introduced us to Hogan. Because I'm going to tell you a story right now, but after about 6 to 8 weeks, we wanted Terry to get in a match. So we had a bunch of little spot shows. And for those people too young to know what a spot show is, it's away from your regular shows. I mean, Florida had a regular schedule. So we had a series of little fundraisers. Eddie liked to do fundraisers for organizations and high school wrestling teams. So we were down in Fort Myers or Fort Pierce, Florida, a little place on the east coast of Florida. I booked Terry there, and so Terry showed up, and it was against a journeyman by the name of Don Serrano. We put Terry with one of the best guys we could possibly put him with, one of those journeyman guys. And you got John, you know what I'm talking about. The guys that go around 6 months one territory, 6 months another territory, and they're gone. But they work with your up and coming talent, and they make them look like $1 million. So we booked Don Serrano against Terry Bollea. And Fort Myers or Fort Pierce. Like I said, I can't remember exactly what. But anyway, I've never seen this before, and I've never seen it afterwards. Serrano's in the ring, and back in those days, you did not have music entrances. You just did not have it. It was way before music come out. So, but we're in this little gym in East Florida. All of a sudden, Serrano's in the ring. So here comes the next guy out, who is Terry Bollea. Now, nobody has ever seen this kid before. Nobody has ever laid eyes on him. Terry started walking. It's like a scene from Rocky. I mean, I swear it is. It's almost identical scene from Rocky. Where all of a sudden this guy appears and he's head and shoulders above everybody else. And the crowd just quietens down because holy cow, who is this guy? Where'd this guy come from? Because they had no advertising on, no pictures of him, no TV of him, nothing. By the time he gets to the ring, Conrad, John, he's getting a standing ovation. Jack and I kind of look at each other. Holy cow, what did we just witness out there? And the match absolutely sucked. But at the end of the match, Don did the professional thing, and he put Terry over 1, 2, 3. The crowd just erupts and goes crazy. Jack and I, we got something here, man. This guy, look at the reaction he got. But that was his first match. The second match we booked against a guy by Brian Blair. Brian probably had a year experience at that time. So it was kind of a change in scene for Terry to see how he could handle that. So we booked these two around for several weeks, and man, they had bang up matches every day. But that he got a standing ovation on that very first entrance on the very first show.
Now, John, from what I understand, you do another great podcast every week with Mr. Brisco called Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw, and you've got a special guest coming up where you're going to be talking about Hulk Hogan later this week, right?
Yeah, we sure are. We got Brian Blair, who Mr. Brisco just mentioned, who Brian is a dear friend of Hogan. You know, all those guys in Tampa were really good friends and close with Hogan. So between he and Mr. Brisco, as you can already see, Mr. Brisco has as many stories. You know, a lot of people claim they were part of these stories, but as you can see, a lot of people have kind of either embellish or remember wrong a few things through history. So we're going to be talking all things Hulk Hogan on our Stories of Brisco and Bradshaw. It's going to drop on Thursday morning.
Be sure to catch that. I can't wait to hear from Mr. Blair. I love their relationship, him and Hulk Hogan. And while we were recording this morning, we've been able to find some early footage of Terry Bollea training when I believe this would have been down in Florida. Let's take a look and see if this jogs Mr. Brisco's memory. Is that what we're looking at there?
Yes, sir. Wow.
Hey, look at the judo throw with no knee pads.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Yeah. Wow. Look at that. That's Matsuda. He didn't wear any pads at all. Back in those days, John, we wasn't like you guys nowadays. Where you got the tape.
That's right.
You threw 5 rows of tape on your wrists, you know. I think, and I really think, I don't think Hogan was the first to do that, but I think he kind of, got it out there because he became such a big star and he had that tape all around. But tape and pads, we had no pads or tape back in those days.
It wasn't invented yet.
Yeah.
Hey, Conrad, you know, when I worked with Hogan one time, I think it was the time in Philadelphia, they wanted somebody to take the leg drop, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm taking it. They're going, John, you're getting like this big push, but you don't want to. I said, bullshit. I said, I'm taking the leg drop. I got to take Hogan's finish. That's how he beat the Giant. Yes. And so he drops the leg on me and he potatoes me and he busts my mouth and nose open. So when I come back, I'm trying to get the blood off because I don't want him to see, I don't want to, I want to sell it or anything, and Finley's there and he goes, dude, you just got busted open by a plastic knee. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I don't know if his knee was plastic or not, but Finley was giving me hell about it. I don't care. I got busted open by Hogan. I'm happy.
What a great story. Mr. Brisco, I want to ask you because I think everybody listening to this knows that your brother Jack was one of the most well-respected, greatest NWA champions of all time. I mean, he just oozed authenticity. I mean, he was as real gets. And respectfully, well, Hulk Hogan's persona was, I think Triple H said it really well on the tribute they did on SmackDown. Hulk Hogan was sports entertainment. And your brother was really more of a professional wrestler, whereas maybe Hulk Hogan was a sports entertainer. But you've told me before privately, your brother Jack was a big fan of the Hulk Hogan character, was he not?
Oh, he loved Terry. I mean, he loved Terry. Terry was a real guy. I mean, and when Conrad, when you're a businessman and you own part of a territory, you don't care if the guys are entertainers. You don't care what the hell they are. You want them to draw you money, and we saw money in that kid. And Jack saw big dollar signs in him, and there's so many stories floating around how he got here, how he got there. Well, Jack bought him his first pair of wrestling boots. That just shows you the relationship that Jack had with Terry. We sent Terry on his way. He didn't have a dime in his pocket. I pulled $100 bill out of my pocket and gave it to Terry, which, by the way, he paid both of us back. He paid Jack back for buying the boots, and he paid me my $100 bill back. We sent him up to Louis Tillett, one of the all-time great bookers up in the Panhandle of Florida. And from there, he goes around. Something we always knew about Terry. The territories in the South, we didn't use a lot of big giant guys. We used, young guys or average sized guys who were fantastic athletes, fantastic wrestlers. So Terry was so big that we were actually, and I kind of kicked myself in the butt when I say that, we really didn't know what to do with Terry because he was so much bigger than everybody else. We knew that Terry would eventually end up in New York, and we wanted to be the ones that sent him up there. So when we sent him to Louis Tillett up in the Panhandle, up there in Alabama and Florida, we told him when When Louis tells you you're ready to move on and go to New York, come back and let us know. My son Wes posted a post the other day about Terry when Terry decided he was ready to go to New York. One day, my brother and I are playing pool in my game room and in the Florida room there, and all of a sudden, Wes comes, Dad, here comes a bunch of motorcycles down our driveway. Who the hell is that? Because I live way out in the country, and you don't come down, but I live on a lake, and usually if there's lake access, people are coming down trying to find if there's a public access to it or not. So I'm thinking it's just a bunch of guys coming down. So I go out, and it's Terry and I believe Brian Blair and Beefcake. They come in, and Terry tells Jack and I, hey, you guys always tell me when I'm ready, when I think I'm ready. I get the approval of Louis to go to New York to come and talk to you. Jack picks up the phone right there in my game room and called Vince McMahon Sr., not Junior, but Sr. was in charge. Told him about Terry, and he said, get him on the next bus. I'll play it up here and tell him not to worry about anything. So we tell Terry, okay, Vince Sr. wants to take a look at you. Terry goes up there. Terry still don't have any money. He's still making preliminary money, still struggling. Goes up there. He don't have a jacket. So Vince Sr. looks at him and said, do you need a jacket? So Vince Sr. sends a guy out and goes to a costume store, mind you. And that first jacket that Terry walked out to Madison Square Garden, he got a jacket from a costume store in New York that Vince Sr. had bought him. I wish I could find that damn jacket. That's how much when Vince Sr. looked at him, and holy cow, Vince Sr. knew right away he had to go by there.
Now, Mr. Brisco, talk to us a little bit about Vince Sr. I know everyone listening to this is very familiar with his son, but yeah. Vince Sr., he really believed in promoting the different nationalities. He'd have a great Polish star and a great Puerto Rican star. And this is in advance of Dana White and the UFC really showing the flags on the tail of the tape and really trying to get, nationalism behind each performer. And I guess the story goes that it was actually Vince Sr. who came up with the name Hogan and wanted him to be the great Irish star for the New York territory. Do I have that right?
Yes, sir. You have it right. I don't know the complete story, but it was definitely Vince Sr. that came up with that. And so we went. Vince Sr. was a very personable guy, just like Junior is. But the Vince Sr. he really had the gift of gab. We used to run, we being Florida Championship Wrestling, we'd run shows, of course, in South Florida, down Hollywood, Florida, Fort Lauderdale. Each time we would run one of those big shows, if Vince Sr. was around, he would come around and watch our shows, watch how we ran our shows. That's where I first met Junior was at a Hollywood, Florida show. We did a big spectacular down there, and we had a great relationship with Vince Sr. So we always knew the Snowbirds were in South Florida at a certain time of year. So he would loan us his champion like Superstar or whoever was hot up there, and we would book them in our big shows in Hollywood because it's a big ass building. And so he would come to the show. He'd bring Junior every once. That's where I first met Junior also. But Senior would come down and watch our shows and ask all kind of what a great promoter and what a great mind he had. But he was always searching for knowledge, just like Vince Jr. was. So it didn't fall too far from the tree with Vince Jr.
We know that famously Vince Sr. would not approve of Hulk Hogan taking time off to go work the Rocky films. So Hulk Hogan becomes a big star and actually lands on the Johnny Carson program in 1982. And Vern Gagne has Hulkamania running wild. But then I think as the story goes, Mr. Hulk Hogan no-showed the sold-out Christmas night show for the AWA. And as a result, the very next night in Madison Square Garden, we saw Bob Backlund drop the world title to the Iron Sheik. And on the 27th, Hulk Hogan made his WWF debut again, this time at Wrestling at the Chase in St. Louis. And little did we know, in less than a month, Hulkamania would be running wild in the WWF. This was an exciting time for Vince. He's going to go national, and it feels like he's got his man. I think he needed a commitment, and no showing the Christmas night show may have been it. But what history, too, just to see Hulk Hogan's first match back is at a historic venue like Wrestling at the Chase. This is a storybook beginning of the biggest run in the history of wrestling, is it not, John?
It's unbelievable. And when he went on the Johnny Carson show, I remember watching that. It was shocking. You know, I don't know how big Johnny Carson was. I was a huge Johnny Carson fan. As anybody who grew up, was alive during that era, everybody was. But he was sitting there with the sleeves cut out, everything he did. You know, it was a tuxedo, whether it was a suit, whatever it was, because he had those massive arms, and he was always tan. He had the big neck. Hogan looked like a superhero. I mean, this is like I think it's before they had the name Avengers, but he would have been the head of the Avengers. I mean, he was a walking, talking superhero, which is what Vince McMahon Jr., we've never called him Jr., wanted. And that's what everybody wanted. I say what everybody wanted. Look at this. That right there is insane. And he looked like he was 8 feet tall against Sylvester Stallone. It was so freaking amazing to see that guy. And when he went on these shows and you saw him against, say, normal people, it was just shocking, the size disparity. And so when he showed up, I mean, there's nothing else you have to do. You stand there against Sylvester Stallone, who's one of the biggest stars of all time. Stallone looks like he comes up to his navel. And then when he picks him up over his head, he looks like he's holding like a little piece of kindling he's throwing on a fire. And he launches him about 10 rows into the crowd. That's a stunt, but that's Hogan. It was just unbelievable seeing him in person. And for Vern, what a miss. I mean, good grief, man. That's a T-ball for you. Teed up for you, and you just whiffed.
Not only that, I mean, after the Rocky appearance, he starts using the Rocky theme song for his entrance music. I mean, this is
and his promo, the ultimate male versus the ultimate meatball. Thunderlips in the flesh, baby. It's just freaking awesome.
Man, I can't wait to celebrate Hulk Hogan a little more. But first, let's take a break. We'll be right back. All right, this breaking news is brought to you by our sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Secure your privacy with Surfshark. Go to the link for 4 extra months of Surfshark. In our top story, internet security is more crucial than ever. Protect your online life with military-grade encryption. Enjoy a secure, unrestricted internet experience. With Surfshark VPN, you can shield your data on public Wi-Fi and avoid identity theft and fraud. It keeps you safe, even in the most insecure online environments. Never worry about who's spying on your data again. Surfshark has you covered. With Surfshark, you can break through online barriers and access content from all over the world. WWE Network. Whether it's streaming your favorite shows or accessing blocked websites, Surfshark ensures you stay connected wherever you are. And now a quick update for travelers. Surfshark can save you money on flights and hotel bookings by eliminating location-based price differences. I didn't even know that was a thing. It's a secret travel hack that's always in your back pocket. Secure your privacy right now with Surfshark. Go to the link for 4 extra months of Surfshark. We are live here on YouTube taking your questions about Hulk Hogan and, of course, his incredible legacy that he leaves behind. Let's do a quick catch-up. John says, this is a question for all 3 of you. What is your favorite Hulk Hogan moment, and who would you book Hogan against today? Let's start with you first, Mr. Brisco. You saw the rise of the red and yellow up close as a part of the WWF machine. Do you have a favorite Hulk Hogan memory?
Yes, I do. It was in Miami, Florida. Hogan had been on one of these grueling, and everybody's heard of the legendary schedule that we used to have to run back in those days. Terry had come off one of those 40 or 50-day runs where he was just exhausted. He was late getting to Miami, and I was doing the promotion at the time. I'd lined up a bunch of Make-A-Wish kids, and all the words are out on how many John Cena did. Well, the record that John Cena broke was whose record? Was Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan's record for most kids that they see for granting last wishes there. And so Hogan come in. I mean, he's worn out. He's having travel troubles and all that stuff. Comes to the ring, and John can testify to this. Sometimes you come off the rope, man, you don't want to see nobody. You don't want to have to do it. All you want to do is go in the dressing room, put your head down and just relax and just get some quiet time. Terry walks into the building. Of course, 50 people are pulling on him. You got to do radio. You got to do TV. You got to do this. So Terry, I mean, we always had that special bond because I was the one, you know. And so Terry, he said, "You got anything you need me to do?" I said, "Terry, I hate to do this, but I got about 15 kids back here that really need to see you." He said, "Give me 5 minutes, I'll be out." Terry went in, cleaned his face, washed his face, and splashed some cold water on him. Come out, had a different attitude, He said, "Let's go." He took 10, 15 minutes with each one of those kids. He blew off radio promos. He blew off TV promos. He was not going to leave until he saw everyone. So that's the side of Hulk Hogan that I remember, the time that he would devote to these kids and everything. You know, we all make mistakes during the course of our life, but when you see something like that, you find out how genuine these guys really are. And for Terry to do that after coming off that grueling schedule and sit down and just take personal time with the kids, where the kid felt like they were talking to them, each one individually, which he was. But it's such a rewarding thing to see. I was so proud to be a part of it.
Now, John, you've told me a story before privately. I don't think it was on air, about how he went out of his way to spend time with kids as well. Can you share that story?
Yeah, I'd love to. And Dave Silva, I sent him the picture. I found it finally. We had, I run programs with at-risk kids all over the world. And so has Mr. Brisco. He's done wonderful work in native lands. He was just up in Oklahoma doing incredible work with the Chickasaw Nation. And so I was in Bermuda, and I had this program, working with at-risk kids. Had some wonderful people there. Patrick Callow was the coach. He's going to be in this picture. A wonderful young man. And a lot of these kids had never been off island. They're kids. You try to keep them out of gangs. You try to keep them in school. Try to keep them out of jail. And so we took them to Florida and to play in a rugby tournament. And the reason we chose rugby was because it's cheap. It's like soccer. You can play 5-on-5 or 15-on-15. It's like football or cross, where you need all the equipment. You can play just with a ball and grass and a bunch of kids. And so we had all these kids there. And so I said, "Hey, guys, we're going to go down to NXT." And I knew Hogan was down there, but I knew a lot of other stars were down there too. I said, "Let's go see some stars." And so we got in there. I said, "Guys, listen, just stay in the back. Nobody may come up. Don't know. They're all going to be very busy." I said, "So don't interrupt them. Don't shout out to them, because they'll be shooting TV shows." I said, "But you're going to get to see some really cool stars today." So I had them all back there in the back, and Hogan's there. And he's one of the times when he's about to have back surgery, and he could not walk. I mean, literally, he could hardly move. He was so bad. Hogan sees all these guys, and he gets up and literally hobbles across the arena and sits there and greets every one of these kids, takes selfies with them. It was the time of their lives. If Dave has that picture, you'll see these are these kids. A lot of these kids had never been off island before. There's Patrick Callow to the right of the picture, a wonderful young man who's still in Bermuda, runs the program. But all these kids were sitting there. They were in awe of Hulk Hogan. And Hogan came over there, and he could hardly walk, and spent all that time with these kids. He talked to them. It was just one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. And by the way, Hogan was the only star that did. There were a lot of guys there that were very healthy, and no offense to them. I mean, you do what you want. Hogan was obviously the biggest star, but they didn't come over. Hogan did. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Those kids will remember that the rest of their lives.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm a big Hulk Hogan fan. He is the reason I'm talking to you guys. I mean, he's what got me into pro wrestling. And I feel like there's been a lot of conversation online that, is maybe out of place. I want to share Mick Foley's message that I think is really the way we should all feel right now, especially with this being so fresh. Mick actually took to social media, and he says, "I wish we in the wrestling community could all agree not to respond negatively to a wrestler's death for a minimum of 72 hours. No one's family should be subjected to such criticism after losing a loved one." Listen, there's no such thing as a perfect person. I don't think God's made one yet. And the outpouring of support for Hulk Hogan has to have made his family feel good. And these days we talk about John Cena as like a more modern Hulk Hogan for a lot of reasons. You got to think, John, that Vince had the Hulk Hogan character in mind when he established John Cena and refused to turn him heel all those years. John Cena was kind of the modern Hulk Hogan, and we know what a great job he's done with Make-A-Wish, but Hey, one of the records that John had to break along the way was the record number of Make-A-Wishes that Hulk Hogan had granted. I want to take just a minute, John, and talk about the parallels between John Cena and Hulk Hogan, because there's a generation that's grown up with John Cena the same way kids my age grew up with Hulk Hogan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always thought Cena had one of the hardest roles in professional wrestling history. You know, Hogan comes along and he has this incredible run with WrestleMania and all the things that he did. And then there's a natural lull. You know, they say business is cyclical. I think it's cyclical because when big stars leave, you can't replace them, and you put everything on that big star, justifiably so. So it takes a while to find the next, and it's never the next Hulk Hogan. You know, it's like Piper used to always tell me, you can't out Hulk the Hulk. You got to be something different. So when Cena comes along, he's following The Rock and Stone Cold in an attitude era where you could flip people off, drink beer, cuss all you want. Now all of a sudden he's in a PG to G rated era. I thought Cena had the hardest role of any champion probably in history, but he was basically, there was not a next Hogan. I mean, obviously he was completely different, but the cookie cutter fits almost the same. You know, he was the guy that did the Make-A-Wish. He was the guy that sold all the merch, just like Hogan. He was the guy that sold out arenas. He was the guy that was your front of your company. And there was a reason you couldn't turn him heel. I mean, he was selling half the merch. Who else is going to sell it? I mean, everybody's making a freaking fortune because Cena's a babyface. You don't want to turn him heel. It's the same with Hogan. I don't know if you could have turned him heel back in the 80s. I think in the 90s when he did it, I mean, Hogan's run, the only thing you could even compare him to is Londo's. Or maybe San Martino, who sold out the Garden 286 straight times. I mean, those three guys, that's about it. You know, Lawler sold out Memphis 52 straight weeks, which is insane to do that every week. There aren't many guys in the world that that you can even put in the same breath as Hulk Hogan. John Cena is one of them, and there's no doubt about that. And it's very close similarities to them, what they did with kids, the merchandise they sold, and how good characters and people they were in everything you could put them in. You could put Hogan in anything, and Hogan was going to be on fire. You could put Cena in anything, and Cena was going to be on fire. There's a lot of similarities between the two.
Mr. Brisco, it's obvious to see the formula for Hulk Hogan worked. You know, the other territories, specifically like we'll call it Jim Crockett Promotions, the NWA liked to have a heel champion, or at least JCP did, and they wanted all the baby faces to chase. They felt like there was more money in the chase. Well, clearly Vince had a different approach. He felt like with Hulk Hogan, he needed a heel factory. So he'd have this superhero like our own Superman or Batman, and then we're just going to create new villains for him to run through. That almost feels reminiscent of what Jerry Jarrett did with Jerry Lawler in the Memphis territory. It was the unbeatable king, Jerry Lawler, against a whole cast of characters of monster heels. Do you think the booking style or philosophy, just the positioning of Hulk Hogan, was similar to the way Jerry had presented the Lawler in Memphis, or is there another territory that you think Vince had in mind with his superhero against all comers?
Well, I never really thought of it that way, but now that you laid it out like that, Conrad, very, very eloquently, I do feel like that there's tremendous similarities there, but on a much larger scale. And it's
Right.
harder to do it on the scale that Vince Jr. did it on with Terry. But the formula remains the same no matter what the size is. So I think you're on to something. I never really thought of it that way. But, you know, Hogan's days with what was the organization? Vern Gagne's organization. What's AEW? What
AWA.
AWA at the time there. You know, people say, well, he screwed Vern around. I mean, you know, I always like to say none of these guys would have left if the conditions would have been better. So Vince Jr. offered something better. And I always, somebody asked me the other day, do I think the same thing would have happened with Vern's territory? I don't think Vern would ever accepted the entertainment aspect of Hogan. And without that entertainment part of Hogan, I think he would have just been another big monster talent out there. So I don't think the same result would ever happen anywhere else except somebody that was willing to accept the entertainment aspect of Terry Bollea.
John, I want to ask you, you know, when we're talking about Vern, I guess the story is out there that for years and years it's been repeated that Vern was selling Hulkamania t-shirts and Hulk Hogan merchandise, but wasn't giving Hulk Hogan his fair cut. And maybe that's the reason there were some upset feelings. He wasn't being cut in on the merch. But allegedly, Vince had a meeting with Hulk Hogan and said he wanted to make him the first wrestler to make $1 million a year. And that was music to a young Terry Bollea's ears, and he was off to the races. Had you heard that merchandise story before?
I'd heard it, and I don't know if it's true. And I don't want to throw shade on Vern Gagne. Greg's a good friend of me, and Mr. Briscoe's both. And I don't know what actually happened. I do know, at least from what I've gathered from everything, was that Vern, like Mr. Briscoe said, was not going to have a big showman be his champion. He wanted to have a more of a shooter, or more of what he considered legitimate based wrestler, rather than a guy who's just going to sell out every arena you put his name on, which seems kind of crazy, but that's how a lot of these old promoters were. They wanted these, what they would consider legitimate wrestlers. That's one of the reasons, Dusty had some issues, as Mr. Briscoe has said on our podcast several times, getting booked when he was NWA champion, because people didn't like the look. Even though he's going to sell more tickets than anybody else they have in that territory, there were guys who didn't like the look of Dusty when he was NWA champion, and they didn't want to book him. And so this was just Vern being really old school, being an old shooter that would rather have a Dean Dutton than a Hulk Hogan. And the matter of drawing more money, they weren't going to give in on their principles. And that's Vern's prerogative. I disagree with it, but hey, Vern's a legend.
AOTV Productions is with us here live, and we were just talking about John Cena. He says, I wish we could have gotten Hulk Hogan versus John Cena. What a match that would have been. I do think it's interesting, John, when you think back about John Cena at WrestleMania. During the COVID WrestleMania, we wrestled Bray Wyatt. He sort of channeled his inner Hulk Hogan for an NWO version of John Cena. If that match were to have ever happened, and I realize the timeline just never really worked out, but if it could have, would you have rather have seen babyface Hogan versus babyface John Cena, or would it have made more sense with John Cena versus NWO Hollywood Hogan?
Oh, no. I'd want to see NWO Hogan. No doubt about it. I don't want to see babyface versus babyface. No, absolutely not. I want to see The Rock versus Hogan with Cena playing The Rock. Yes. I think that would have been amazing. Look, I think Hogan has had the most consequential run of all time. I think the only guy more consequential is either Londos or Vince McMahon in the history of the business. And, probably just one, probably just Vince, because his run in the late 90s. I mean, here's a guy that's past his prime physically, his back was already bad, and he comes back and creates the entire Attitude Era. I mean, not by himself. I understand that. Kevin and Scott had a lot, and Steve had a lot of people had to do it, but a lot of people had a lot to do with WrestleMania. But he's the front man. He's the guy on the cover of Sports Illustrated, which was unheard of back then. And he's the guy that's carrying WrestleMania. He's the guy that carried us into the Attitude Era. I think it's one of the greatest runs, maybe the greatest run of all time. But I would love to see NWO Hogan versus John Cena, because at some point he's going to Hulk up. And when he does, just like he happened with The Rock, it's going to be one of the greatest reactions in the history of the world. That reaction, I watched it just the other day just to see it again. When he hulked up after Rock hit him with that rock bottom, my God, man, I watched it live. It was unbelievable. I was a kid again. I was a kid with with my buddies, just sitting there watching Hogan again. It was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I would love to see NWO Hogan versus Cena.
Mr. Briscoe, you've seen a lot of big Hulk Hogan moments and matches, and of course, he made most of those memories hand in hand, arm in arm with Vince McMahon. Needless to say, they've had an on-again, off-again, love-hate relationship, whatever you want to classify. What can you tell us about that Hulk Hogan, Vince McMahon dynamic in real life? Because I feel like there's been a lot written about it, but I don't think we'll ever hear enough stories about that relationship. These guys together really built professional wrestling the way we see it and consume it today. Tell us about their sort of hokey pokey relationship through the years.
I will, but if I can tell, John brought up Rock and Hogan, and I was sitting at Gorilla that night, and it's one of the most electrifying moments I've ever sat through in my entire life. When you control Gorilla, you're controlling the flow of the event, the timing of the event. we plan for introduction to go, a minute and a half, 2 minutes if it's really spectacular. That night when Hogan hit the ring, and John, you were backstage, and I'm sitting there grilling with Vince and everybody else that's in control, and all of a sudden Hogan goes out there. That place in Toronto just friggin' erupts. And okay, it's great, man. You're getting goosebumps. Then all of a sudden, just through the timing in your head, that experience, you expect it to start dying down. That didn't die down. It just got louder and louder and louder. For almost 20 minutes, Hogan is standing there, and the people are they're busting every decimal point that you can actually bust it on a meter there. And we're saying, oh, man, what are we going to do? And Vince said, let it go, man. We don't get this every night. So, man, we just let it go. It's almost 20 minutes of just sure pandemonium, baby, as they used to say back in the old days. But their relationship, there I go back now. I'm going back to answer your question. But, John, that was probably one of the most exciting nights probably in the history of our business, if you just step back and
hey, before we talk about the Vince relationship, I want to circle back to that match. I'm glad we're spending a little more time on it. John, I've often believed that it was that reaction that night that we're talking about the Rock Hogan WrestleMania 2002, it's WrestleMania 18. A month later, we're going to see Hulk Hogan become the champion. He'll actually be the last WWF champion before the company has to switch to being WWE. But then a month after he wins the belt, he drops it back to Taker in Nashville. So we do get the huge return and incredible reaction, not just at this show, but when he shows up at Monday Night Raw the next day in the red and yellow. It is an overwhelming reception. And I've often wondered, is that why maybe Vince never turned John Cena heel? Because he knew that when you've got such a well-established babyface like that, the fans don't really want it. I mean, originally, Hogan was supposed to be the heel that night against The Rock, but the fans wouldn't have it. They rejected it, and they rejected it in such a profound way that we're still talking about the crowd reaction all these years later. Do you think that was in the back of Vince's mind, and maybe that was the reason he never pulled the trigger on a John Cena heel turn?
Yeah, I think so. And also got to remember that match with The Rock. The Rock, you talk about a brilliant guy. And a lot has been said about Hogan, justifiably so. The Rock didn't turn heel that night because he knew it was a global audience. He had the sense. I mean, let me tell you something. 99.9999999% of wrestlers would have turned heel that night that had any sense, that knew what they're doing, that had been in the ring a while. And obviously, if you're out there with Hogan, you've been in the ring a while, or you wouldn't be in the ring with him. They would have thought, hey, man, this is a perfect chance to turn heel. I'm just going to turn heel. They're going to love it. And the live crowd would have loved it. But Rock knew it was a global audience. And Rock stayed in character. Rock didn't didn't change. It was, he did enough, but it's pretty remarkable by both guys. I mean, that was a moment in time of two of the greatest entities in sports entertainment and entertainment history that you caught two guys at their absolute peak in front of an incredible electric crowd. And I think that's one of the reasons I agree with you, Conrad, that Vince never wanted to turn Cena. I mean, Conrad, I would sit in those creative meetings, not for the meetings the day of. I wouldn't sit with them on Thursday and Friday, when Bruce invented the headlock and the lockup and wrestling. But I would sit there, on the day of, because me and Michael Cole had to know that for, what we were doing in commentary. And it was pitched all the time to turn Cena heel. I mean, everybody, it was almost monthly. Somebody would pitch. He's selling at most half the merch. He's the one selling tickets. It was unbelievable. And I'd see him every night go out there, and the crowd would be, let's go Cena. Cena sucks. By the time he'd finished with his promo, every single night, Conrad, he had that whole crowd turned. That Cena was just amazing. And I think Vince 100% was correct not to turn him heel. And he probably would have never turned Hogan either. I don't know what he would have done with him, but, Hogan had that great run as a heel. But I think that was a big reason.
We're going to talk a little bit more about Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon, but first we need to take a break. We'll be right back. Man, sometimes you just need a little something. Something in the middle of the afternoon to help you get through the rest of your inbox, or maybe something at the end of the day to make your evening more enjoyable. And that's where today's sponsor, Soul, can help. Soul is a wellness brand that believes feeling good should be fun and easy. Soul specializes in delicious hemp-derived THC and CBD products designed to boost your mood and help you unwind. Their best-selling out-of-office gummies, I love that name, were designed to provide a mild, relaxing buzz, but boost your mood and enhance your creativity and relaxation. It is a favorite in the Thompson household. The out-of-office gummies come in 4 different strengths, so you can find the perfect dose for your vibe. Choose from a gentle microdose, that's what my wife likes, the perfect buzz, Dave Silva's specialty, a noticeable high, Casio Kid, or a fully lit experience, aka the Brother Love Jones. With wellness at the forefront, you can feel good about what you're putting in your body, and all of Soul's products are made from organically farmed, USA grown hemp. They're all vegan, gluten-free, and low in sugar. And if you like their out-of-office gummies, man, you've absolutely got to try the new out-of-office beverage. It's a refreshing, alcohol-free alternative that's perfect for a little summer sipping. Plus, Soul has many other amazing wellness products, both with or without THC, including a variety of gummies and capsules that can improve sleep, stress, pain, focus, bloating, and more. Bring on the good vibes and treat yourself to Soul today. Right now, Soul is offering my audience 30% off of your entire order. Go right now to getsoul.com and use the code WRESTLE. That's GETSOUL.com, getsoul.com, and the promo code WRESTLE gets you 30% off. That's getsoul.com, promo code WRESTLE.
Hey, Conrad, I'll tell you though something that a lot of people don't know is that Hogan was reticent to do some of those crazy promos. You know, when Vince would start doing the promos, you know, the Norman Schwarzkopf and the world's largest bazookas are coming at you, brother. You know, Hogan was reticent to do a lot of that. Vince was the one that kept pushing him. Vince used to tell that stuff all the time on the plane when he would talk about promos for people, you know, because guys invariably would fight him over promos, and he would, it's like Hogan when Hogan do this, you know. But that was Vince. That was one that come up with all those crazy stuff that Hogan was saying, and Hogan was a little pushback on it, you know. And you talk about the relationship with Vince and Hogan, and Mr. Brisco can probably speak to this better. You know, I rode the plane so much with Vince when he talk about him, you know, and he loved Hogan, but it's almost like two guys who were like your 2-star athletes in high school. You know, there's a little bit of jealousy there. You know, it's like, oh, that's Hogan doing that, you know, and then Hogan would be the same way. Oh, that's Vince doing that. You know, they're both big stars, and they're both, you know, we live in great houses now because those guys built the business for us. But there was a little bit of that, you know, alpha male stuff going at each other quite a bit.
Mr. Brisco, what can you tell us about Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon's relationship through the years?
Well, I can agree with John that it was like the chicken and the egg. You know, who came first? And okay, it's the chicken and the egg with Vince and Hulk. You know, who really made the business? Was it Hulk or was it Vince? To me, it's one and the same. But you know, the relationship, I mean, I remember when I first got invited to start coming to the office, you know, after I finished my gig as a local promoter down here, Vince wanted me to come up to the office. So I went up, and we would be having these high-level meetings with sponsors and TV people. And Terry would call him. I'm sorry, the monster is calling. And the monster would be that Terry Bollea would be, hey, monster, how you doing? And so I saw that relationship there, and I saw how tight they were. It was like almost like a father-son type deal, even though their ages wasn't that far off with each other. But they had such a tight relationship. And then I also saw it as the years grew on, that separation there. And you know, I could understand the separation because Terry's all fighting us, and you know, we're getting our butts kicked. So there's you know, always that why'd you leave me and all that stuff, and probably the same way Vern felt, but Vince was starting to feel those feelings too. So it got to a point where Vince would try to call Terry on something, and Terry wouldn't take his call. So you know, the chain of command. So Vince would get frustrated with Terry, and JR call Terry and pitch this deal with him. So JR would try to call him. Maybe the first time Terry would take his call. Second time, then it got where JR couldn't get in touch with him. So eventually it kind of filtered down to me. Brisco, you're tight with the guy I call. So I always had that relationship where I knew I could call Terry and pick up the phone. He would pick up the phone for me. So I would pass some messages along there. So I ended up being that conduit between the office and Terry for many, many years, because Terry and JR will probably tell you this story. Terry wouldn't take calls from Vince or JR, but he would take them from me because he knew I could get the message directly to Vince. But I saw that relationship kind of separate, and then I would see the reunions. And Vince is the top guy. I mean, he knows where the bread was buttered there. When Terry would come in, everything was Terry there. I mean, that you could see the magic to him. They had a great relationship. It's that love-hate relationship, but that went on for years and years and years. And I'm glad at some point towards the later years that they were able to bend fences and become friends again.
Let's talk just a bit about the departure. I mean, you were there. Hulk Hogan's going to finish up shortly after WrestleMania 9. And I think he even thought that was probably going to be his last WrestleMania. You've shared on your Shed Treasures episodes over at adfreeshows.com that he actually gifted you his gear that he wore that night at WrestleMania 9. And I think he even inscribed something on there like the last time or something like that.
One last time. You explained that to me. I didn't know really what that meant until you explained it to me, what I had.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody was kind of
And
surprised.
by the way, Mr. Brisco takes Venmo and Zelle.
And all that stuff is still sitting there. My wife, when are you going to get that junk out of my house? And I mean, I got a lot of that junk sitting around here. I'm sick of it, to tell you the truth.
Well, we'll figure that out. But I do want to spend a minute and talk a little bit about when he did leave. I mean, I think now we all remember that, hey, that was during the steroid trial. And there's a lot of stuff going on that's not fun. The company is down. Vince is going to be battling for his life. And Hulk Hogan is just trying to stay out of Dodge. So when he leaves the WWF, he decides to go full-time into Hollywood. And he's doing Thunder in Paradise and trying to do some movies. But when Eric Bischoff comes calling, eventually they do a deal. How did Vince receive that information that Hulk Hogan, who clearly I think Vince was ready to move on. I mean, he had been trying to move on for a while if you go back to 1990. So by 93, it's probably best for everybody if there's a change of scenery. But now you've got this other layer with this whole federal investigation. And I think as the story goes, the feds felt like Hulk Hogan was going to be their star witness. And he got a deal, and then he got on the stand, and he did not throw Vince under the bus. That had to be maybe the most trying moment in their relationship. What can you tell us about that time, Jerry?
Well, I can tell you, it was holy cow, was it ever an intense time in all of our lives, because we'd made the decision to throw our ticket over with Vince, so everything was predicated on that business doing good. And so when all this stuff started happening, I was really nervous about which direction WWE was going. I didn't know. And by the way, Vince called me from the courthouse before he was going in to get the verdict and asked me if I would come up to the office. Like I said, I was local promotion at the time. A lot of people liked what I was doing here, so they put me over with Vince. So Vince wanted me to come up to the office because they knew my relationship with Terry. And I don't know if it was whether to kind of convince Terry to talk in Vince's favor or not. But anyway, I was up there, and I was kind of pissed off at Terry, because here's my opportunity to go, up to the big leagues, so to say, and the golden goose is leaving, so I'm left with nothing to work with, basically. Even though we had a tremendous amount of talent there, but none of them were over to the extent of Hogan. But during that course, Conrad, it was very intense, and Terry got up there, and I of course, I don't know the inside dealings on what happened, but everybody was terrified that Terry would start pointing the fingers there, but he didn't. He kind of took the bullet himself.
Hey, Mr. Brisco, got to ask you this because you knew Hulk well. Did you think that Hulk would roll on Vince? Did you think there was a chance that he would?
John, you always think there's a chance, but knowing Terry and knowing his background, and that's one thing. His parents were so strict with Terry. Terry, even though he's a rock and roll band, all that stuff. His mom was a good old Southern Christian lady, as they say. One of the good old Georgia Christian ladies, and so he had the right discipline behind him there, and grew up in an atmosphere where your languages and your thoughts were you express them. So I really didn't know at the time, John. I was nervous that he would, but yeah, on the other side of I don't see how can a guy do it? That made you what you are, and so that's how I didn't know.
Yeah, we were following it, at the time, different places, and we thought it was pretty cool. Hogan didn't roll. He did the right thing. It wasn't like he was going to lie or anything, but he did the right thing. He did the right thing and didn't try to throw anybody on the bus for personal gain.
By the way, I see Brisco Jr. trying to get in the camera shot there.
Yes, sir. I've got a rescue cat. I've got a rescue cat named Brisco, Conrad.
John, I'm really proud of John. John went out and rescued 2 cats. He brought 3 cats over from Bermuda when he been over, and through the years they've all passed away, and now he went to rescue. Him and his wife Meredith went to rescue and adopted 2 cats. I'm the namesake of one of them. And
that's right.
Picture Nolan Ryan's the other one, so I'm honored.
That's right.
Nolan Ryan's
that's right. My 2 favorite great sport athletes, Nolan Ryan and Gerald Brisco, and I also got a Jack Johnson running around. So I got three great sports legends: Mr. Brisco, Jack Johnson, and Nolan Ryan.
John, we've talked a little bit about, you would have liked to have seen NWO Hollywood Hogan against John Cena. Well, let's talk about when Hogan turned heel. When that happens, you're actually working with the WWF. You've grown up a Hulk Hogan fan. I mean, hell, his name's even on your football trading card. Yeah. So we know how you felt about that character. But now when you're on the opposite channel and you find your promotion competing with where Hulk Hogan is now, and he's turned heel, what did you think of that creative? Did you think it would work? I mean, I don't think anybody could have imagined it would be the huge success it was, but what was your immediate reaction to a heel Hulk Hogan?
It's like fighting Mike Tyson, when you're getting your ass whooped and all of a sudden he finds a new punch to hit you with, some bolo punch or an uppercut. Or like, dude, I didn't know you had that one in your arsenal, or you're kicking our ass anyway. That's how we felt about it. I thought the whole thing, I'd never gone through a war like that. A lot of guys haven't, but I'd never seen guys leaving territories before, and all of a sudden Hogan shows up as a heel. I thought we were dead, and I remember when Brett left and Jack Lanza, was a good friend of mine, told me one day we're sitting there and he was smoking his cigarette and he says, as long as that guy's in the chair, we're fine. And he's talking about Vince McMahon. And it made me feel a lot better, but I still wasn't convinced, because I'd never seen this happen before. And I thought I'd missed the boat. I chose WWE because of Mr. Brisco over WCW. And I didn't really regret it, but I thought, man, I missed the boat with the wrestling. I missed it in the Sportatorium. I missed it not really that much in Europe, but I was at the tail end of Europe's territory days, and same in Japan. And I thought, man, I've missed it everywhere. Business is just terrible. And now the group that's getting hot, I turned them down for this other group. So I'm thinking, boy, I've made some great decisions in life.
It's interesting as we take a look back and examine Hulk Hogan's career. I mean, there's so many big moments, and I think perhaps none bigger to Hulk himself than his WrestleMania 3 main event against Andre the Giant. Mr. Brisco, you were involved in the company. You were there to see some of this build and the way it all came together. What can you tell us about WrestleMania 3, a moment that still lives on in wrestling history?
I can tell you the build up to it because I was a big part of it with my promotion here in Florida. As a matter of fact, I did the Saturday night main event where Andre reached over and tore the crucifix off of Terry's chest. It was here in Terry's hometown. And Conrad, John can testify this, and I'm sure you've been in the audience as well. All of a sudden, an audience is just so stunned that nothing is said. It just goes deathly quiet. And as a participant in that night's event, when you hear that, it's scary because you don't know what's on the other side of it. You don't know if it's going to be man, that was awesome. It was great. But when he tore that crucifix off and Hogan went down on one knee, holding it, I mean, it was a feeling in that building like something I'd experienced very few times, if at all, that night. So you just knew that you had something just on the reaction of that local crowd. And so it was such an awesome feeling that night. But you just had your doubts whether or not this thing, because you're looking at two beloved characters at the time. Andre was the most respected, most loved person in our business at the time. Here's the giant, Andre the Giant. I get the newcomer, and it wasn't exactly a newcomer, but the new kid on the block, so to say, at the time. So you just didn't know what was going to happen. And then when you hear the numbers that they're trying to go to, you just don't know. But, through the miracles of promotion, hard work, and the right people in the right places, they were able to pull this off. But they never would have pulled it off without Terry and Andre.
Were you in the Silver Dome that night?
No, I was not. I was doing 22 closed circuit events here in Florida and Alabama and Georgia and the southeastern United States. I had my handful running my own shows. I hadn't been elevated at the time. I was still what they considered a local promoter at the time. But I was so grateful for what they did, because what a payoff I got as a local promoter.
I know this sounds silly to you, but there's a lot of us who never got to see something that was quote unquote closed circuit. Can you explain to our younger listeners exactly what that means and how that worked back then?
Yeah, it was terrifying, Conrad. It really was, because you build up these big events and you don't know, you don't really know, and you're asking people to come in and watch a giant screen and charging them out the keister for a ticket to sit there for 3 hours and watch a big screen TV. You don't have the technology at that time wasn't what it is today. So you didn't know whether your billing was going to go down, you were going to get lag in time, or you didn't know what the technology was going to present you that night. So, I'm sitting in, I'm watching it in Kissimmee, Florida at the Silver Spurs Arena there, which was there. We couldn't get an Orlando building, believe it or not. So we had to go to the closest place to it where they had a decent sized building, was Kissimmee, where they had a bunch of big rodeos. So we set that place up for a pay-per-view. I ran Miami, which we had about 6,000 people down there. And then
wait a minute, you had 6,000 people in the arena for Miami to watch a screen?
Yeah,
watching the screen. Yeah, we I got it in my shed treasures in my book. I got attendance for all of them.
People don't draw that money much for their annual big event of the year.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what we had. So you knew you had something, but you're terrified because of the technology aspect of it. Because I think there'd been a big fight just shortly before that they'd lost feed and they had to refund all the money and all that stuff. So I was terrified of what we're going to. When you're running 15 to 20 events, you're going to have some issues. I only had issues in one place in Augusta, Georgia. And it was just for like 35 or 40 seconds. But that 35, 40 seconds made you went, holy shit, am I going to have to refund all this money, which we didn't want to do. But it was a terrifying night that night, just on the aspect of the technology part of it. But the people, they sit there and they all night long, they sit there and finally when they come out, I mean, you got fired up with just looking at the crowd and hearing the crowd reaction. The sound level was fantastic, but hear that reaction of the crowd, you got really fired up for it. And you were just sitting there praying at that time, please don't go dark on me. Please don't go down on me. But what a night it was.
John, we were talking a little bit about WrestleMania 3. Here's the facts. I know that for years and years, people have said that the attendance was 93,173 fans. It was really closer to 78,000. But more importantly, we were talking about watching a big screen in an arena. I mean, that's really what closed circuit was. So this is the infancy of pay-per-view, because this is 1987. So closed circuit is one channel, pay-per-view is another. On pay-per-view, WrestleMania 3 did 400,000 buys, but on closed circuit, which is exactly what Mr. Brisco was just describing there, John. Fans go buy a ticket, pay for parking, and come in an arena and watch a big screen. Over 450,000 people bought a ticket to watch a screen. It's unbelievable what a big draw WrestleMania 3 was. We're talking $5.2 million just for the closed circuit. I mean, this is an all-time record, and this is in the infancy of pay-per-view. It feels like these days
Yeah,
that was
it
even
was,
hard
that
to
was the
imagine.
last year with closed circuit too, Conrad, by the way.
You know what's cool though is what's old is new again. Like this weekend is SummerSlam, and I think you can actually go to your AMC theater and watch SummerSlam. So closed circuit in a weird way is back. Hey, and speaking of SummerSlam, we got to take a break. We'll be right back after these words. This weekend, it's the biggest SummerSlam ever, 2 nights, and MyBookie has odds on every match. Jade Cargill is a heavy favorite over Tiffany Stratton for the WWE Women's Championship, and Drew McIntyre and Logan Paul find themselves a plus 300 underdog to Randy Orton and Jelly Roll. Meanwhile, the betting odds are completely against Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed, who are taking on Roman Reigns and Jey Uso in tag team action. At MyBookie, you're not just betting winners. You're betting entrances, turns, shock wins, and getting paid when you read the story right. Sign up with the code WRESTLE50, and MyBookie will back you on your first deposit. $100 gets you 50 extra. $200 gets you a Benjamin. What you do with it is up to you. 2 nights, SummerSlam 2025. Bet smart, cash in, only at MyBookie. We're live here talking about all things Hulk Hogan. We've got a fun question here from Matthew Rodriguez. I know this will be up your alley, John. Can you imagine this? 1987 Hulk Hogan versus 2025 Gunther. I mean, that would have been unbelievable, wouldn't it?
It would have been, yeah. And Hogan could work with anybody. You know, you look at what he did, man. You look at some of the matches he had in Japan and matches he had with Stan Hansen. I mean, Hogan could work. You know, he did certain things because he was Hulk Hogan. You know, he worked a certain way because he was, but he was trained the right way. When Mr. Brisco talks about it, I mean, how can you train with 3 better guys than the Brisco brothers and Hiro Matsuda? I mean, Hogan was trained well. He was a big guy. He was a tough guy. He could do all kinds of things. He just was Hulk Hogan because that's what he needed to be. And I think he would have had an incredible match with Gunther. I thought the match, WrestleMania 3, to me, it's the most consequential match in wrestling history. And I don't see how anybody can disagree with that. And no offense to, you know, these guys who are now having these 5-star matches. Congratulations. I think it's wonderful. But how many of those 5-star matches are you going to remember in 40 years from now?
Right.
Everybody that is any type of wrestling fan knows where they were when Hogan slammed Andre. To me, it's the most consequential match of all time, and it absolutely delivered. And by the way, closed circuit, I don't know if you ever went to one, Connor. They were fun. I remember watching Hagler and Leonard on closed circuit. It was fun going to the arena watching closed circuit. You know, I'm glad pay-per-views come taking over, but it was fun to do that.
About 15 years ago.
I always told Vince he got my money on that Snake River jump with Evel Knievel.
That's right.
Me, Jack, and Dusty, we all drove over to front dinner, paid our $20, went in and sat down and watched it like everybody else, man.
That's fun. Right. Hey, I'll tell you a funny story. So Vince, we asked him about it one day. You know, we're like, Vince, what were you thinking? And Vince told us, he goes, well, he said he could make it. You know, that deep voice. Yeah. And so I had to, you know, I just had to ask him back. I said, how did it do? I want to know the real skinny. He goes, as we say, it was an artistic success. So anytime there was a match that would be absolutely the shits, me and Michael Cole goes, that was an artistic success. And Vince goes, God, that's great. That's great.
I love that. We're talking a little bit about Hulk Hogan this morning. And of course, I think most of us remember his WrestleMania 6 match. Most people believe Mr. Brisco, it was the Ultimate Warrior's best match, perhaps against the Macho Man at WrestleMania 7, or certainly his title win over Hulk Hogan in 1990. This was the biggest, tallest order any wrestler ever had to follow the act of Hulk Hogan. He was hoping to channel his inner Steve Young, stepping into the shoes of Joe Montana. I don't know that Warrior ever really met the mark of expectations that were left behind with Hulk Hogan, but there's an interesting story that's come out in more recent years where Hulk has actually suggested that back then he pitched Vince on turning heel. The idea that maybe after he gave both of the belts to the Ultimate Warrior, he starts to go back down the aisle, and then he slowly comes back and becomes Hollywood Hulk Hogan and turns heel in 1990. That's hard for me as a little Hulkamaniac to even imagine. But do you think there was ever a chance of Vince embracing the idea of a heel Hulk Hogan in 1990?
Well, I tell you what happened, and I was privileged to a lot of that because of my relationship with Terry. Terry hit me up about it first, and I just shook my head. Terry, please no, because as John mentioned earlier, the merchandise flying off the shelf with Hulk Hogan. I mean, we all laugh because modern day, because it's what most of the fans remember, the Ulster 316. Well, those yellow and red T-shirts were friggin' everywhere. I mean, you go to the school system. Everybody knows I do a lot of volunteer work for Hillsborough County school systems. They were everywhere. In every school I ever went to, you just saw tons and tons of them. So Terry's telling me about that exact concept that you're talking about. And he said, what do you think the old man will say about it? I said, he'll say the same thing. It'll never happen under my watch. And I said, but go ahead and present it, because I get goosebumps hearing about it, just thinking as a promoter and as a booker, what the potential of it could be. But I'm thinking Vince is going to throw him out of the locker room. And sure enough, Vince said, there's no way in hell that I'm going to let you turn heel. So I don't think it would ever happen under that circumstances.
Let's talk a little bit about what's next for Hulk Hogan after he turns or he returns to the company. We mentioned the famous Rock match at WrestleMania 18. I've mentioned that he would beat Triple H in April for the world title. He's going to drop it back to the Undertaker in May, and he's going to really become an attraction. And that is until next year. In 2003, we get a match that, well, people who follow the business have really wanted to see, because we've heard about Vince versus Hogan, but now it's a WrestleMania match. We know Roddy Piper is going to get involved. It's nostalgia, plain as day. But the idea that we finally get to see at a WrestleMania Hulk Hogan versus Vince McMahon, and even if you go back, John, and you look at just the promotional material getting us prepared for that WrestleMania, most of it was based on Vince and Hogan, not the actual main event. I mean, this was a big moment for not only Hulk Hogan, but for Vince McMahon too, because we've all been under the impression, John, that there was this, I don't know, professional, I wouldn't say jealousy, but rivalry, where both guys felt like, well, he couldn't have done it without me, sort of thing. What do you remember watching Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon at WrestleMania? Is that the type of match that is a sellout at the curtain, if you will?
Oh, of course it is. And the thing about it is, look, we were on both sides. We were rooting for both of them. Those are the two we knew at the time, probably the most consequential guys in wrestling history. Hogan and Vince. I mean, and they love to, they're like two alpha males, like, oh, somebody give Vince the credit. You'd see Hogan over there. So the same way with Hogan or Vince, they wouldn't sell it because neither one sold anything. But you could tell there was that alpha male going at each other. And they're way past their prime physically at this point. You know that. But we know they're going to develop something great because, I mean, these guys make P.T. Barnum look boring. These guys were incredible showmen. Vince was incredible. Vince would specifically not wrestle great, because not that he could wrestle like a 5-star match, as they say, but he would specifically wrestle just with punches and things because he didn't want to look like a wrestler. He would want to look like just an old promoter who was a mean, old, tough guy. Vince would wrestle that way on purpose. And, Hogan couldn't do that much physically. So we knew that there was going to be a lot of bells and whistles on it. And we weren't backstage thinking, oh, this is going to be awful. We're backstage thinking they're going to find a way to make this great. And we knew they would, and we were rooting for both of them.
It's an interesting time in the company because, you've got this transition into the new stars, but there's still the nostalgia for the way things used to be. Of course, no bigger star than Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. But we know that the following year, I guess it's 2 years later, 2005 is where we see Hulk Hogan start to wind down his run. my understanding is through the years, maybe he had some heartburn about his payoffs. He didn't feel like he was paid fairly by Vince. And I think one of those issues
That's
really
never
came
happened
to a
with
head.
talent before, has it, Mr. Briscoe?
No, I'm shaking my head. Yes, damn right.
SummerSlam 2005. It's one of the more controversial matches in Hogan's career. It's Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan, Icon versus Icon. Obviously, two of the Mount Rushmore performers in WWE history. And for whatever reason, Shawn, well, he was a little over the top that night. What do you remember of that night, John? What can you tell us about Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam?
Shawn got a burn his saddle over something. It was something that Shawn was. Those guys look kind of. You understand this well, just like Mr. Briscoe does. Anybody's been around, high octane athletes, man. There's a lot of competitiveness, and there's a lot of competitiveness between Hogan and Shawn. This one's the top guy in one company, one's the top guy in another, and all of a sudden they meet several years later. There's things tend to happen. And I think that's what it was. I think, Shawn knew he couldn't have a great match as he would define a great match with Hogan. And I don't want to put thoughts in Shawn's head. I love Shawn. And I actually was watching it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was great. I didn't think like, oh, why is he doing that? I thought, oh my God, this is great. And it was, I have no idea what to say. I was sitting there watching the whole thing, and we're sitting there just laughing. Like Shawn is like on a different level at this point, and he was having fun. And maybe there was a little bit of animosity with him and Hogan. I think there probably was, but
a little bit, yeah,
just a little bit. I know when Hogan would come in, things would change, and that upset a lot of guys. Because of that. And so I think there's a natural competitiveness between these top guys.
How did you view that, Mr. Briscoe? I mean, we've seen a lot of interviews with Hulk Hogan where he would say that the business, he was even talking to Logan Paul last year on his podcast. He said something along the lines of, people are going to try to tell you this business is a work, but it's not. It's a shoot. He who goes on last, he who has the title makes the most money. That sounds like a shoot to me, brother. That was Hulk Hogan's approach. And then you see in that particular match, man, Shawn is like channeling his innermost Mr. Perfect. He is a Super Bowl bouncing around all over the place for Hogan. Do you think Hogan was upset, pissed off, or disappointed in the match? Or did he think, it was a pretty good match and I won. See you down the road.
Well, first off, you're saying that Shawn's shining. Of course you're going to shine, man. You're in there against a legend, and if you got any competition juices in your body at all, you're going to come. So Shawn knows he's got the youth over Terry. Shawn knows everything he does, he can outshine Terry. So he's laying it on the line. He's put all of his best move forward and putting them together in a fantastic way. But to back up a few hours. Everybody knows about my friendship with Pat was very, very close. Pat was in charge of that match, and Pat and I used to talk about laying out matches all the time, how he did it in a spectacular way there. Pat would come to me and he'd just start shaking his head. Briscoe, I don't know what to do. He said, neither one of them want to do anything. Neither one of them want to let the other guy do anything. So it took Pat just ages and ages just to get a starting point where these two guys could agree. So this went on all day. So finally, at the end of the day, when everything would go through our final production meeting, I asked Pat, everything cool? And he just shakes his head. I hope so. I don't know, but I hope so. And so it turned out where Shawn excelled, and Shawn did everything that Shawn Michaels could do. But I felt for both participants because the ego part took over on both of them there until that bell rang. And then when that bell rings, I don't care what kind of ego you have, the ego, you're going to have the best match of the night. And I think those two guys went out and shined at best as they could. But on a production standpoint, Pat Patterson was pulling his hair completely out of his head and saying all those old Pat-isms that we go around repeating all the time. He had a tough night that night laying out this match, but we all saw it. Wasn't the greatest match in the world? I don't think it was, but I think it was a good match for both of them.
Well, Mr. Briscoe, let me put you on the spot. If you were to recommend, say, 3 of your favorite Hulk Hogan matches, if some of our listeners want to go celebrate Hulk Hogan and watch some of Briscoe's favorite matches from the Hulkster, what would you recommend they check out?
Well, first of all, just for the reaction, I'd check out the Hogan and the Rock match. I mean, to me, that was just one of the greatest matches of Terry and Dwayne, because they both set aside their egos for a while and went out and did what was right for business. You hear that a lot, doing what's right for business. A lot of times you get these egos in there. They don't do what's right for business. They do what's right for the character. Me as a character, would I do that? But they went out, and I think they did what's right for business. And of course, the topper, I'm going to just name 2 of them. The topper has to be Andre the Giant. Like John said, it's the most sequential match that ever in the history of professional wrestling that changed the world. I don't care what the marks out there say. That match actually changed the way wrestling is perceived throughout the entire world. So those 2 matches right there, I don't think any other. I'm sure there's other. And I actually enjoyed 1, 3. I actually enjoyed the Mr. McMahon match with Hogan.
I enjoyed his match with Randy Savage at WrestleMania 5. That was one of that's probably my first feud that I remember in wrestling. So that one always stands out to me. John, what Hulk Hogan matches would you recommend to our listeners?
I'd recommend all of those, and I'd probably throw in the Shea match that they had, where Hogan was the heel and Andre was the babyface. I thought that match, it gives you such a unique perspective of what happens later. So I would go with those matches, but I would throw in the Shea match.
I do want to mention that when you're talking about the Shea Stadium match, that's a really interesting one, because WrestleMania 3, respectfully, was built on the fact that, well, we didn't have access to the information that we do now. So we were embellishing a little bit, but hey, that's what we have to do for storytelling. We were saying things like, well, these guys have never wrestled before, and Andre's never lost a match before, and Andre's never been slammed before. And none of those things are technically true. Hulk Hogan had already done all of those. But I do think that is a difference in the way wrestling is presented now versus the way it was back then. We just talked about this a few weeks ago, John, here on the program, that these days you couldn't get away with padding Goldberg's streak. Like, he didn't win 20 matches over the weekend, that sort of thing. But I think that all of that buildup, that really added to the drama, and I think that's the reason we hold the Andre match in such high regard. Do you think we should do more of that? Should we just... I mean, I know the internet's going to call out everything and say, well, actually, they did wrestle, and I get that. But, man, it sure was fun to just suspend our disbelief. Yeah, this is the first time they've wrestled, and he has never lost, and nobody's ever body slammed that big, stinky giant. We should get back to that a little bit, I think, John.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm willing to bet that your brother Jack probably slammed Andre before, didn't he, Jerry?
I believe he did, yeah. I believe Andre, if Andre liked you, Andre let you do anything you wanted to do in there. And I'm sure that probably Andre even called it, because I know Jack would call it, because he didn't ever fancy himself as a big, powerful guy.
Yeah.
But Andre was slammed all over the country before.
Yeah, that's right. He was slammed more often than he was not. So many guys. But Conrad, I agree. I used to have, Vince in my ear all the time. And Vince would, we'd sit there, beforehand, over notes. He goes, "This is for the first time we've ever done this." And, we didn't barely bring up, Vince, we actually did this about 4 years ago. Nah, don't bring it up. Just first time we ever done it, and, and I get that fans out there, they would pick me and Michael Cole apart because of that. Go, guys, this isn't the first time we ever done this. This was done back in April of XXXXX. 90% of fans don't care, and that's who you're really going for. And so, yeah, I agree with that. I thought the build-up to Andre, he had been slammed 100 times, and he had been beaten before. But making the undefeated giant who never left his feet, that made the match. That's what Sports Illustrated was about. That's what the talk shows were about. That was everything. And then when he did it, that's the most famous body slam in the history of wrestling. One of the most, as Jerry said, one of the most consequential moments in wrestling history was when Hogan slammed Andre. Anybody who's a wrestling fan will tell you where they were. They'll remember that 100%. They will know when that happened. And so, yeah, I think it's fun to suspend sometimes realism to forget about the fact that somebody beat somebody in Hanover, Germany, in front of a crowd of 2,000 people, and say, that guy's never been beaten. It makes it fun. You want to make it fun for the fans.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I mean, these are supposed to be comic book characters. They're supposed to be larger than life. And comic book characters mean that, well, we can just recreate history every now and again. Hey, let's talk about history. AOTV Productions says Jericho and Triple H said they didn't want to go on last. He's talking about WrestleMania 18, following Hogan Rock. And they were told, you have to, it's the title. And the Oracle wants to know, would Stone Cold versus Hogan have worked as well as Rock versus Hogan? Now, John, the story has been for years that Vince really wanted Hogan versus Austin at WrestleMania 18, and Austin showed no interest in that match. But Rock, according to Dave Meltzer, showed nothing but interest. He was jumping at the chance to do it. And I do think, with the benefit of hindsight, respectfully, no one talks about Scott Hall and Steve Austin that night. I would have loved to have seen what Steve, I mean, that Stone Cold character was the new high watermark in the company. Those two legends together on paper makes a ton of sense. You know the guys in real life. You understand wrestling in a way we fans don't. Would Stone Cold versus Hogan have been as good as The Rock and Hogan, John, in your opinion?
I don't know, because styles make matchups. And because you have Rock, who can be so over the top dramatic, and Steve was just go, go, go. Now, the Steve that wrestled in the Royal Rumble and Bret Hart when he comes out, and Steve
97, yeah,
and Steve does the old Home Alone, where he's his face, and he's like, oh my God, that Steve, my God, that Steve. But Steve was a different guy at the time. He was this go, go, go baby face. I don't know if that works as well as The Rock does, who can be over the top dramatic. The Steve that was a heel, yes, 100%. That being said, Steve's one of the greatest workers of all time. You put two great workers out there, I think you're going to see magic. Would it have been the same? No, it'd have been completely different. But Hogan could go. Hogan could wrestle, and I think it would have been really good. Not really good. It'd have been one of the greatest. It'd have been one of the greatest of all time. Would it compared with that? Don't know. You're talking hypotheticals here against one of the, as Jerry says, one of the greatest pops of all time. People talk about that pop when Hogan hulked up, but if he'd have done it with Steve, it could have been just as big.
We're celebrating Hulk Hogan today, and Brisco and Bradshaw are going to be doing that this Thursday with Brian Blair, another Tampa original. You don't want to miss that. You can enjoy that show anywhere you enjoy podcasts, right here on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. It's Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. You don't want to miss that. We still want to talk about Jimmy Hart today. I want to also talk about Randy Savage, and we've got a handful of questions more we want to get to. But first, we need to take our last commercial break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. All right, guys, it's time to enter the room. Dig first. Blue Chew isn't just a tablet. It's a cheat code for your crotch. Stronger, harder, longer lasting. Like someone gave your downstairs a pep talk and a gym membership. Blue Chew is the original brand offering chewable tablets for better sex. Add some mass to the main mast. Guys, this isn't just about performance. It's about your legacy, or, well, your third legacy. Give her group chat something to talk about. Nothing makes you more of a legend than a little Blue Chew. Go discover your options right now at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. As always, you can get the first month of Blue Chew free. Just use the promo code WRESTLE at checkout and pay $5 for shipping. That's it. Join Blue Chew's mission to upgrade humanity one thrust at a time. Head on over right now to BlueChew.com for details and important safety information. And a big thanks to Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast and our boners. Hey, let's talk a little bit about Jimmy Hart. I saw a great tweet that I wanted to share with the world here. I did this the other day with Eric Bischoff, but I feel like Jimmy Hart needs to get his flowers a little bit more. Wow. We've got this great tweet that came out from Sigmund Wrestling. He says, we should all aim to be a friend like Jimmy Hart, loyal for life through the good times and bad, willing to protect and put over his best friend until the last day and beyond. I can't imagine what he has gone through this week, but I know he's one of the best people this business has to offer. He's one of the kindest, most giving individuals I've ever worked with. God bless Jimmy. Mr. Brisco, you've known Jimmy Hart for a long, long time. What can you tell us about his relationship with Hulk Hogan?
Not only have I known him for a long time, but I got to fly back home from the Outstanding Tribute on SmackDown the other night, and Jimmy and I, we sat in Atlanta waiting for our plane, and I just said, Jimmy, can you kind of walk me through what happened to Terry? And he kind of walked me through, and it was tough on Jimmy to even talk about it at that time there. After Friday night was such a release for all of it, emotional release for all of it. So I kind of thought he'd had it out, getting it out of his system. But we sit there in Atlanta airport, and he started. I mean, the emotion just started with Jimmy, and I just felt for Jimmy. Because Jimmy's one of those guys, and I hate to compare him, but he's your favorite pet. He's your favorite animal, that's with you constantly by your side. Terry did not have to worry about one single thing as long as Jimmy Hart was in the audience with him. Jimmy took care of everything for Terry, and recall Jimmy's last messages with Terry was at the Hogan hangout there, and he described seeing Terry and what's his son's name?
Nick.
Terry and Nick together. The good time they were having, the expressions on Terry's face. It brought it around to separating the Hulk Hogan from the Terry Bollea and the father from a friend. And Jimmy got to see that fatherly type. He said it almost felt like Terry knew that his end was coming to a close, and he wanted to get close to Nick. He said, that'll be something I'll always remember, probably more so than anything else, was just that last two or three nights before Terry passed, the relationship of a father and son. And it brought tears to me in Atlanta airport. It was so emotional. I just feel for Jimmy because I know the dedication that he had and the love that they had for each other. And the feeling was right back from Terry on Jimmy. Terry told me a couple of times how much he respected Jimmy and how much Jimmy had helped him get through a lot of rough. Jimmy is one of those guys that you want to have for a friend all the time, 24/7. And Jimmy was there for Terry 24/7. So I love Jimmy Hart to death. Always have, even before he was part of it. Jimmy got to be was a manager of Jack and I for a couple of matches in Memphis, and we got to know him and really love and respect him. But Jimmy's one of those guys that you want around you because he's so positive at everything that he does and every comment that he makes. So God bless Jimmy Hart.
Hey, Conrad, Jimmy, was the ultimate, gatekeeper for Hogan. And like Mr. Brisco said, he was just fantastic. Jimmy took incredible care of him. So we're doing the JBL and Colt show one day, and we wanted to get Hogan on it. Hogan was there or something. So I go to Jimmy, who I've got a wonderful relationship with. And he was literally was open the door and Hogan's behind him. I say, Jimmy, I said, we want to get Hulk on our little YouTube show. It's a silly little YouTube show, and we just want to get him on it because we think it'd be funny. We got a little funny spot for him. And I said, what do we need to do? And Jimmy goes, just ask him. so Hogan was there. I said, Hulk. He goes, John, what do you need? And I said, we have a silly little YouTube show. He goes, just tell me what you want. He goes, John, you don't have to ask. And I'm like, well, I thought I'd had to get, it was so cool to deal with him, but Jimmy was so much that you're so used to say, Jimmy, can I talk to him? Because, he did take care of him in a lot of ways.
Hey, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, Mr. Brisco, but I think I know what your answer is going to be, so I feel comfortable asking. I had a blast spending the weekend last weekend with Eric Bischoff in Waterloo, Iowa. It was his first time to the TNT Hall of Fame. We're going to recommend that everybody listening to this come check us out next year. I'm going to be there. John's going to be there. Mr. Brisco is going to be there. And even though I promote StarCast, even I have to agree, it's the best value in professional wrestling. But I'm always surprised at who's at these things. Of course, every year it's a bigger crowd, thanks to you and your Bring a Friend initiative, Mr. Brisco. But I had a conversation with Eric about, because I always ask. I mean, I am doing this podcast right now because of my love of Hulk Hogan. Like, he is the reason I became a wrestling fan. So I would always ask Eric in confidence, hey, how's the real life Terry doing? And as we're having that conversation at the end, I said, something I'd like to see happen in the future. I want Nick Hogan to attend some of these events like the TNT Hall of Fame. We know that Charlotte Flair is going to carry on the Flair legacy, but neither of Hogan's kids are going to pursue in ring professional wrestling. But just attending these events and being a staple and a fixture and carrying on and celebrating his dad's legacy, I hope that Nick will embrace some of those events like the TNT Hall of Fame. Can we formally invite Nick Hogan to Waterloo, Iowa next year? I think we should.
As my friend Pat Patterson used to say, please, please, Conrad, use your influence and let's get Nick Hogan at Waterloo, Iowa next year for the fabulous TNT Hall of Fame. He'll have the time of his life. He'll get to experience the love and respect firsthand for his father up there. I mean, Dan Gable, of all people, you sit down and you talk to Dan Gable about his first wrestling experience. You know who he's going to bring up first? It will be Hulk Hogan. Not those old timers like Vern Gagne, Don, Dick Hutton, Jack Brisco, Jerry Brisco, Kurt Angle. He'll bring up Hulk. He grew up a Hulk Hogan fan just like everybody else. So he'll find the respect not only from the hardcore wrestling fans, but from the greatest amateurs of all time that show up for that weekend, as Dan Gable would. And Nick would have the time of his life. Wow, Dan Gable actually knows who my dad was. Dan Gable actually respects my dad. So I would love that, Nick. Please, Nick, on behalf of your family, please, let's get yourself up to Waterloo, Iowa next year.
I mean, John Nick is like the spokesperson for the Hogan family at this point, don't you think? I mean, I really want him to feel that love and appreciation because there's so many wrestling fans and people in the wrestling community. Because as you know, John, this thing is really like a large extended family, this wrestling community. And I want Nick to be a part of that and feel that. And I feel like for whatever reason, maybe it was past trials and tribulations or reality TV shows or just perceived heat on his dad or whatever it may be. Man, all of that goes away now. And I hope that Hulk Hogan, the character, and Terry Bollea, the man, can continue to be celebrated. And I want Nick to be there to represent the family. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think he should be, as a son should be, and should understand how important his father was. He may, but it's hard to understand how important a family member is when you grew up with him.
Yes.
And, Christine Londos was there. Jim Londos' daughter had one of the original belts of Jim Londos. The place was packed, to listen to her panel, which I was very fortunate to be on. But it was the same with Hogan. I mean, we're all here because Hogan was successful. If Hogan's not successful with WrestleMania, Vince may make it later, but it's going to be years. It's not going to be like it looks now. But then again, Hogan comes in the late 90s. He had the greatest run, I think, of all time. If he didn't, he's one of the top 2 or 3. And he comes back in the 90s and creates the Attitude Era when the business was dead. I mean, it was dead at that time. And he didn't create it, but he was one of the main figures, just like he didn't create WrestleMania, but he was one of the main figures. I mean, it's just an incredible run. We owe him a massive debt in this business. We stand on, the pillars of these giants, giants like the Briscoe brothers and giants like Hulk Hogan. But if not for Hulk Hogan, this business doesn't look the same. And Nick, it'd be fun for him to come see that.
I totally agree. I'm looking forward to it. I hope we can make it happen. Mr. Briscoe, I want to spend a few minutes here talking about Randy Savage. Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan as a feud is what got me to fall in love with pro wrestling. But it's interesting, of course, we talked about what a high watermark WrestleMania 3 was. But by the time WrestleMania 4 rolls around, we know that Hulk Hogan is now going to be tag teaming with Vince McMahon to create their own Hollywood movie known as No Holds Barred. So they need someone to step into Hulk's shoes after the run they had at WrestleMania and WrestleMania 2, and now the biggest of all time, WrestleMania 3. Look no further than the Macho Man Randy Savage. They would form the Mega Powers over the following year, and magic was made. It's arguably the greatest story ever told on WWF TV. I know that Bruce Pritchard to this day still feels like this is the #1 all-time WWF story, and those guys were synonymous with each other. Now, that's what we saw on screen. Behind the scenes, their relationship could run hot and cold. What can you tell us about Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man and why it works so well with fans and on screen, and maybe why sometimes it didn't work so well behind the scenes?
And the longest handshake ever.
The best handshake ever.
Oh my goodness! You took a whole
The best,
segment. You took a whole segment for one handshake. If you, Jerry, if you think about if you had written that, like, hey, we're gonna milk this handshake for 8 minutes.
Yeah.
there's no one who would agree to that, and they did it.
No one, no. Well, first of all, I want to say, Conrad, I'm like everybody else. I think this is the absolutely peak of Hulkamania and the Savage Madness. There's times in the business where we all turn back into fans, right, John? We all turn back into fans, and this was a time where you're able to sit there as a talent and turn into a fan. And I'm so happy because here's two of my best friends at the time, sitting out there in the middle, Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan. Both of these guys, they did so much for me, helping me elevate myself into the WWE that I could never repay them. I mean, they did promotion for me. They did stuff. I get calls from promoters, local promoters all over. How do you get Randy Savage? How do you get Hulk Hogan? I think it was like 20 years of wrestling experience is how I got them, and I built a friendship with them. But I think it was the absolutely peak of both of these guys' career. They came together at the right time with two total entertaining personalities. To me, it was a home run right when we first put Savage and Hogan with the big V versus Hogan on the other side. It was a hit right from the very beginning. Then these two guys love the competition. And I think they love the competition so much. I think that's kind of what separated them at the end, because you get two, and I'm going to say it because they're both my friends and I love them both, but they both were full of ego. They were both full of ego, and you got to be at that level, or you're not going to make it. You're not going to do the things that you need to do because, your kindness is going to take over. But there's no saying in our business. There's a time and place where you got to be totally selfish with yourself in the business. And I think these two guys at the same time had realized that, it was oil and water trying to get these two guys to agree on things at time. And I think behind the curtain out of the arena that they couldn't agree on anything because they agreed on so much that I just think they were so comparable in thought and process wise and professionalism that outside the arena, they didn't want to be around each other. They couldn't stand each other for a long time, even though they were best friends to begin with. I think that friendship I saw it myself. I saw it kind of dwindling out, and I felt bad for both of them because I knew inside what both of them meant to each other.
We're celebrating Hulk Hogan here today, and I'm so glad we're getting the chance to do this. Austin Crothers is with us here live, and he says, no, I'm sorry, it was Guy W. Johns. I'll get it right. It says, Buff Bagwell lost his leg and still made a loving video in remembrance of Hulk. I love seeing people face difficult situations and still stand strong. The entire wrestling community has come together and shared wonderful messages on social media. Everyone from Ric Flair to Adam Copeland to Nick Jackson of the Young Bucks. But as we take a look at some of these pictures that Silva's put together, what a number of tributes that have just dotted our landscape. Of course, the SmackDown tribute this past Friday on USA, to see the entire roster out there paying respects. Our buddy Bruce Pritchard, front and center there between Jimmy Hart and you, Mr. Brisco, and Cody there, right there with Triple H. Of course, Caesar's Palace did a tribute. That was, of course, the last WrestleMania of Hulkamania, if you will. And they had a tribute there celebrating WrestleMania 9 and Hulk Hogan's world title victory. Madison Square Garden, the most famous arena in the world, they paid tribute to Hulk Hogan. And I believe that photo is of the Hulkster leaving the ring with the world title, having just beaten the Iron Sheik, the big green belt, January 24th, 1984. Even here in my stomping grounds, Pensacola, we've got a bridge known as the Graffiti Bridge. And man, over the weekend, they couldn't wait to get down there and start painting it up. What you gonna do? Hulkamania running wild on Pensacola. I even saw a buddy of mine who lives in Tarpon Springs, and he's on a Facebook group, and he posted this picture last weekend, Clearwater Beach, and the rainbows going right to Hulk Hogan's house. The world is an amazing place. Hulk Hogan leaves quite a legacy Final thoughts today, Mr. Layfield, as we wrap up our tribute to the immortal Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, I was thinking about Hogan coming out with the title. At that same time, David Von Erich, the same year passed away. I believe the same year passed away in Japan, and the combination of both, pretty much sealed how the territories were going to end. It was just a moment in time, and you had to get the title off of Backlund, put it on Sheik as a mailman, and take it to Hogan, and that changed the world, man. I mean, it changed everything. Getting Hogan to be the guy. I don't know if I think Vince makes it anyway, but it's not. We don't look the same. I think he is the most consequential wrestler of all time, and I know. At least in my heart, I believe this, that the match with Andre was the most consequential match in wrestling history. I think everything changed because of that. He delivered. He and Andre delivered. Andre was a giant that was in bad health at the time. They found a way to get through the match. Hogan found a way to get through it with him. And it's just, there's nobody like him. And there will never be anybody else like him. That people want to find the next Hulk. Piper used to always tell me, you can't out Hulk the Hulk. There ain't an next Hulk. There never will be. And I'm glad that I got to meet the Hulk. Glad I got to meet the Hulk. I'm glad I got to see him, with the kids from Bermuda. I'm glad I got to work with him in so many different ways. And when he just said, John, just tell me what you need. And when he told me, he goes, you're the champ. And I could die right now. I literally called one of my college roommates and go, Hogan just called me the champ. I really did. It was that big a deal to me. I'm so glad to be able to know him and be able to come on here and talk about him. And my dear friend, Mr. Gerald Brisco, had been so influential in his career and be able to hear his story.
Mr. Brisco, close us out here. I want to give you the floor as we wrap things up. And I want to remind everybody, Brisco and Bradshaw are going to get together and do this again on Thursday with Brian Blair. It's going to be another Hulk Hogan themed episode. So if you're ready for more Hulk Hogan content, I'm going to be watching WrestleMania 3 with Tony Schiavone this week on What Happened When. I'm going to be talking about Hulk's time in Memphis and TNA with Double J Jeff Jarrett. And, of course, we're going to be talking about the Hulkster more with Eric Bischoff and even Jim Ross. But who better than two Tampa natives, Mr. Blair and Mr. Brisco, chopping it up on Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw. It's available anywhere you enjoy podcasts. You can check it out on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. But Mr. Brisco, close us out here. Tell us your final thoughts on the incredible Hulk Hogan.
Well, everybody is entitled to how they want to remember Hulk Hogan. I remember him as Terry Bollea, and that's how I want to remember him. I might get a little emotional here, and I hope I don't. But I remember the way he treated my two boys growing up, Wes and Joe. I mean, they were like kids. My son Wes posted a beautiful tribute. I mean, of course, me and my son, he got to, when I go over see Terry, I'm going to see Hogan. If he was out, I'd go, can I please go with you? Every time I'd take him over there, Terry would treat him like $1 million. Put him on a speedboat one time, took him out back, and went out to the Gulf of Mexico and rip roared that speedboat up to 70, 80 mile an hour. My son come back and, Christmas parties and all, birthday parties and all that stuff. Both of my sons got to experience that. So I saw Terry as a father, and I saw how he treated my two kids. Everybody, like I said, has their opinion. They're entitled to how they want to remember. But I don't remember Terry as a controversial political guy. I remember Terry as Terry Bollea, a South Tampa, Port of Tampa, grow up in a roughest neighborhood in Tampa and survive and come out and become a super mega. But Terry never lost that roots of his upbringing. He was always a good Christian man. I mean, we all have faults and we all to the T. But I know to watch Terry react with the Make-A-Wish kids and volunteer to do things, volunteer to come to my school's parties, my kids' parties and all that stuff. That's the way I remember Terry. So, believe what you want to believe, but, take it from people who knew Terry firsthand and knew the real Terry Bollea, not the Hulk Hogan, but the real Terry Bollea. And that's how I want to remember Terry. And it just pains the hell out of me when I see some of these comments. I feel like I'm John Layfield. I've never blocked so many damn people in my life as I have this weekend. And John, thank you for giving me the courage to do that. So you talk about one of my friends, I don't care if it's Hogan or Conrad or Bruce or John, I'm going to block your ass now. Thank you, John, for giving me the courage to do that. And like I said, I've never blocked to that many people in my life. I'm not going to put up with that negative BS. I'm just not.
Ladies and gentlemen, go love somebody today. Hulk Hogan was a positive influence for a lot of kids. You know, he used to go on TV every week telling you to train hard, say your prayers, take your vitamins, and listen to your parents. We all grew up with him as like a member of our extended family. For a lot of wrestling fans, he's like, I don't know, a distant second cousin or a great uncle or something. This is one that we're going to think about for a long time. We want to encourage you to go watch WrestleMania 3, watch WrestleMania 5, watch WrestleMania 18, and celebrate the good times with the incredible, the immortal Hulk Hogan.